Welcome to Lead Smarter, Not Harder, your stop for how to stand out as a leader. I'm your host, Jason Davis, and this week we talk about goal setting, how managers can set clear goals for their employees and make sure they're holding them accountable. You won't want to miss a second of this show. Let's go! Okay. Wanted to spend some time in this episode talking about goal setting and specifically what a manager's role in goal setting is or should be, some better ways to go about it, and some problems that we're kind of seeing out there right now based on some research around why this is an important topic, why I really wanted to talk about it today. So to jump right in, really, when you think about setting goals as a manager or a leader of people, the main thing, the biggest thing that we need to set or think about when setting goals is that goals and expectations of employees should be clear, communicated, and understood. There's a lot of ways that managers obviously can communicate those. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. I think where we as leaders kind of fall short sometimes are asking our employees questions about goals, making sure that they're clearly understood and not just assuming that our employees understand what their goals should be. So again, going to spend some time in this episode really separating out some ways of, one, making sure that we have some ways as managers to communicate goals, but then also thinking about ways that we can kind of check with our employees to make sure they understand goals, but also understand where we are on progress with them as well. So, just to highlight a little bit of this problem, and it may seem pretty obvious, right, that goals need to be communicated and need to be clear to employees and workers, for them to be successful. But for whatever reason or another, they're not, or at least the perception from employees is that their goals are not clear. So, and this is some research that comes from Gallup, actually. Only 6 in 10, so that's 6 in 10 U.S. employees strongly agree that they know what is expected of them at work. All right, again, so that's 6 in 10 U.S. workers know what is expected of them day to day. So if you think about that, we've got the other 4 in 10, so that's close to half of U.S. employees begin their day without having a clear definition of what they're expected to achieve. They walk in the building, walk in the door, maybe log on from a virtual location. But 4 out of 10 of those individuals are not clear completely what the definition of success looks like for their role, their job, maybe their company. To me, that is astonishing. I could not believe, it was that deep and really was kind of the trigger for me anyway into getting into this episode and saying, all right, we've got to do something about that. We've got to make this easier and less awkward and more comfortable as a conversation for managers to have. So, again, I wanted to spend some time in this episode talking about a few things, getting into the manager's role in goal setting. What makes a great goal, and then we're going to talk about a quick template that managers can use to help set goals with their team and making sure that they're clear and understood. So to start, what is a manager's role in goal setting? I've broken this into 2 different sections. There's probably more than that, but a couple of different things that I really feel like managers should be responsible for, or the 2 things that managers need to be responsible for in goal setting is 1, delivery, and 2, accountability. So let's break each one of those down. So on the delivery side, this is the delivery of the goal, communication, making sure your people understand it, right? And that gets back to what we just talked about, or what I just talked about. We've got 4 in 10 people that don't know what they're supposed to achieve in a given day. Let's make sure that everybody knows what their goals are. So let's trim down that number. Making sure that you and your team understand what your goals are and what you're supposed to achieve. So, this can be done by asking questions back to your team once you've talked about a goal or initiative or something you're looking to achieve, just to check for understanding. making sure that your team understands the goal in the same way that you do, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to be working to achieve that goal. Your job is to kind of hold them accountable to that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But ultimately, these are the people that are going to be doing that work, and you want to make sure that they clearly understand what you're portraying to them in terms of a goal. So, talk about what success looks like. Talk about what things look like at the end of this. Your job as a manager, again, is to communicate the goal, talk about what success looks like, and make sure your team understands it. Don't tell them exactly how to do it, though. Let them figure that piece of it out, but make sure they know where they should end up at the end. What are those constraints? What things should they be targeting and really thinking about in terms of success? So that's the delivery side of making sure you're setting and giving your team effective and clear goals. So I mentioned also, kind of the second component or the second part of the manager's role in goal setting is accountability. And this really gets into holding yourself accountable as well as your team. It includes following up, communicating any kind of issues, concerns, problems, over a goal or something that you're trying to achieve or a project that you're working on. And from the manager's perspective as well, checking in on progress. You need to kind of stay on top of things in either in meetings or conversation or whatever, just making sure you're checking in on progress and goals so that you know where things stand. And you need to set the stage from a manager standpoint that, accountability towards a goal is a two-way street. It's two-way communication that needs to take place between a manager and their team, or a manager and an employee, or anything like that, right? Because we talked about holding people accountable. Obviously, the manager is going to come around and ask, hey, what's going on, with this project? But I think it's important for managers to also make sure that their employees and the team know that you need to tell me when there's problems, and you need to tell me when there might be a risk to achieving the goal in the time frame that we've established. Those things and those conversations need to happen so that if the manager is in a position, or if you as a manager are in a position to do something about it, you can actually do something about it before it gets too late. So make sure that your team has that safe space with you as the leader to be able to communicate to you and let you know when something is not right, or they might need some help. It's important to make sure that two-way communication exists from an accountability standpoint. So again, delivery of the goal, and then accountability, holding people accountable. Those, I feel like, are the manager's two main roles when you're thinking about goal setting and achieving goals. So what makes a great goal? I think that's a really good question. And, again, there's probably a lot of answers to this. There's probably not many wrong answers. From my perspective and how I used to teach this, to call center managers in the insurance industry was, really kind of thinking about three components. The goal details what should be achieved, to what extent, and by when. And, when you really think about it in those three ways, or those kind of three components anyway, it really starts to simplify and make it very clear for a manager to be able to set and establish a goal, and then make sure that employees understand what it is. So, there's a lot of templates out there for something like this. I'm going to use the SMART goal template here, and it's one that's widely used. There's tons of information available about it. It's certainly not new. It's nothing groundbreaking here. I'm going to add a little bit of context to each part of that, each part of the model, and some things that I think managers might be able to do a little bit differently. But I want to get into this, and I want to talk about this model in particular because it's so simple and it's so effective. I love simple things, and I love them when they're effective. So, so hang with me for a little bit. We're going to talk through the SMART goal model or template, however you want to refer to that, and really give, like I said, some managers, you all, a good way to set goals with your team, hold people accountable, and make sure you're on the right track for achieving them. So let's take a look at the template. So obviously it's starting out as the acronym SMART, SMART. So we'll start with the first letter, S, for specific. And this is where you're really calling out specifically what the goal is and what needs to happen with it, right? So is the goal to achieve, higher sales, to achieve, a higher level of retention or anything like that? This is where you're really trying to make sure you're just being specific with what that is. And again, is it an increase, a decrease, and to what extent? Let's talk about to what extent that metric is going to move, or that goal or that number needs to move, right? So be specific, provide specific information when you're working with your teams and employees on what the goal should be or is going to be. M next, the letter M in the acronym is for measurable. So we have S for specific, M is for measurable. This means that the goal must be measurable. So when you're delivering a goal to one of your employees or to your team, it needs to include, there needs to be a metric tied to it or attached to it anyway. And that metric should be one that's readily available to your team. One that they see often in updates, one that's on some kind of dashboard or report that they get. But you want to make sure that the metric that you're using in the goal is something that your team can see and really, have a way to track their progress on it. So the next letter in the SMART goal acronym is A. A for achievable. So this is making sure that the goal is achievable or attainable. So don't create something that's so far out of reach that your team can't get there. There is a concept of big, hairy, audacious goals or BHAGs, or just huge goals that are meant to move a needle and not necessarily meant to be achieved. It may sound counterintuitive. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of tactic. I'm not saying it doesn't necessarily work. I just don't like it. But part of it is because of the above. It makes it seem like the goal is not reachable anyway. And to me, like I said, I feel like we're just playing games a little bit. If it's like, all right, I'm going to set this big goal. And if I'm a leader, I don't really care if you achieve it, but if you get half of that, then I'm fine, or I'm comfortable with that. I don't know. To me, it's not a big motivator for me. It may work for you. Feel free to try it, but just kind of keep an eye on things like that. So, but again, back to, so make sure that the goal is achievable, something that is actually within reach, something that can be done, by your team, by your employees. And I don't only mean by, to what extent is something achievable, right? So don't only think about, how far out or up or down or increase or decrease do we need to move this metric. But when you're setting the time limit, or you're kind of thinking about, hey, what's the time frame that we're going to use in this goal? Make sure that the goal that you're setting within that time frame is also achievable. So that's also a component of having an achievable goal, is that, it is achievable within the time frame that you're setting. Okay. All right. So moving along to the next letter, R for relevant. So this is making sure that the goal is relevant to the team or employee's role. Again, as a manager, this might be one of those gut check things that you're doing when you're writing out a goal or thinking about what goal you're going to deliver. Is this goal relevant to my team or my employees? And then how do you make that clear to them? I think it's interesting, and it's compelling for managers to find ways to connect goals back to the employee's purpose, and then back to company values or mission, things like that. Really connecting the purpose back to the mission of the company, so that people can see, all right, here's the goal, here's why it exists for me, and here's what that means to the company. I think there's a lot of value in that for an employee when they can see directly, or maybe indirectly a little bit, what their work helps the company achieve. Some people, may not be directly in sales, or may not be directly in service, right? They might be in accounting, or they might be in some back office team that doesn't see the actual work taking place. And they need to know what their purpose is to the company mission. And I think when you're talking about relevance of goals and why, a certain goal may be set for somebody, this is a really good opportunity to do that and to make sure that you can talk through, hey, this is the goal, why it pertains to you. Obviously, this is why it's relevant to your job, and this is why it's relevant to the company's success. That is a huge motivator, lever, I guess you could say, for a manager to be able to pull in terms of just making sure that their employees understand what their purpose is at work. It's something that, again, sounds easy and simple to be done, but not a lot of people have a clear purpose at work or understand what their clear purpose is at work. All right. So now getting into the last letter in the acronyms, we've gone through S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for relevant. Now we're at T for time bound. All right, this one seems pretty obvious, but it's probably the most left out factor or function of setting a smart goal or setting a goal, is really talking about, hey, what's the time frame that we're working on here. If we're going to have a goal, we need to make sure that we're kind of built within, or we've got some kind of constraints around how long it's going to take to achieve, and things like that. And again, make sure it's achievable. Don't set a time frame that's so short that you just can't make it. But make sure you're talking about a time frame. It's not something that's always set in stone. Things happen that might cause you to shift a time frame. That's okay too. It's not ideal, of course, but it's okay to shift a time frame if you've got to do so. But you need to have some kind of target or time frame around the goal. Otherwise, work is just going to creep on forever, or you're not going to attain a target within the time frame that you need it to set yourself up for the next quarter or the next year or something like that. A lot of times when goals are set, especially at a company level, and then cascaded downward, they're done in kind of a stair-stepping way of, hey, we want to get to this point this year so we can get to this point next year so we can get to this point, in the third year, right? It's a lot of times it's about a 3 or 5 year plan and things like that. So there's downstream impacts to not hitting a goal this year. So that's why it's important just to make sure that you're setting up those time frames and that time-bound feature of it, right? So, we've gone through the entire acronym here, SMART acronym for setting a SMART goal. Remember, S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for relevant, and T for time-bound. So let's try this and just kind of put it all together real quickly. This is a super simple example, very generic, but you'll kind of see just, again, you really get back to the three main components. What is it, to what extent, and by when? A really super simple goal that I put together was company direct sales should increase from 25% to 35% by the end of the year. Again, that's so simple. Not something necessarily that I would expect people to use or want to use in terms of setting goals for their team. But again, I just wanted to bring in an example of that. But thinking about it, right, it is specific. We were saying, hey, we got direct sales, and we've given where's the to and from numbers that we should be increasing to and from, or from and to. It is a measurable number, right? Direct sales. We can see that result. Achievable? Yeah, that's, for this example, we'll say yes, it's achievable. Relevant, so in this case, we'll assume it's a sales team as well. And it's time bound, right? We said it's by the end of the year. So again, just a really super quick example that, can be used. Please adapt it for your context, obviously, but, just one that I wanted to throw out there. All right. So as a recap, what are employees missing? I touched on this at the very top of the show. They're missing clear goals and expectations. Again, I said that almost half of U.S. workers don't know what they're supposed to accomplish at work on a day-to-day basis. That means they start their day without knowing what they should accomplish. Again, to me, that is an astonishing number. 40% of people drive to work, log on, walk in a building every day, not knowing what they should be working towards. That's a big issue, and one that I think we can really do some good work on driving that number down. We talked about the manager's role, right? The manager's role is in delivery of clear goals and expectations, and then making sure that your team or asking questions to make sure your team understands the goals. And then accountability, right? Holding yourself and the team accountable to those goals. So it's delivery and then accountability. But then also, it means, again, checking in, two-way conversations, making sure your team understands that it's okay to bring up problems and issues when they see them when it pertains to a goal as well. That's critically important. In terms of your ability as a manager to be able to help them solve those problems and work through them so that you can hit the goal. And then third, we talked about a model for setting goals. We talked about the simple SMART goal model. It's a very simple template. Remember, it's S for specific, M for measurable, A for achievable, R for relevant, and T for time bound. So those are the bigger aspects of a goal, setting a great goal for your employees, for your team. And if you follow these steps, I guarantee you'll be able to create some great goals for your team. So thanks again for listening. I hope that you're able to take away a few tips to make setting and communicating goals easier for you. If you would, please take a minute to write a review, rate the show, and let me know what you think. Have a great week, everybody.